Hi, it's Christy of So to Speak, and welcome back to the So to Speak Closet series. Our next guest is one heck of a guy. To be completely transparent, when I thought about his introduction, the first thing I thought of was he's doing incredible work to better the world. His wife is doing incredible work to better the world. So how awesome the universe pairs up two people who are doing incredible work to better our world. They procreate, bring more humans into the world who are doing incredible work to better the world, and on it goes. In this day and age, it does not get better than that. That's what we all want, right? We just want to make our world a better place, and it starts with every single one of us. So I am so excited to introduce you to Pete Blanchfield, who is the co-founder of the Renewable Energy Opportunity Zone Fund. He also has worn many different hats in his career, and he is joining us to offer insight into, specifically if you're an entrepreneur. You know, I also feel like organizations are consistently jumping into that entrepreneurial spirit. You kind of have to, you don't really have an option at all. And it's really advantageous to support that and to have all of your employees really own that entrepreneurial spirit of innovation and creation and anonymity, and having space to let all the ideas percolate and then come back to the group. And there's more to it than that. Those are the big chunky ones, big chunky pieces. And Pete shares with us just some ideas that you can really put to practice, and some ways to shift our perspective on what's going on and how we can be more in control of how to make our future more of what we want. So how can we use our strengths and contribute in a way that is true to ourselves and also benefiting the world? And equally important, we now have a friend besides Ross Geller, who is showing us the correct way to pivot. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation.
At some point along, when you're doing it yourself and you feel like, there is no pivot, there actually is. And because I was a ice hockey player, I got thinking last night, because I was thinking, I'm not like a sports metaphor person either, because I think if you haven't played the sport, you're like, okay, great. Like, spike the football. All right, just do it right now. And like, does everybody do that? It's like, and so I was thinking last night, I was like, how could I explain this? So in ice hockey, when you're going up and down the ice, you're going in different directions, but you're going toward the goal, right? You're always trying to actually score a goal. And very often you're going toward it, but in order to come back to play defense, to actually eventually get the puck back, you're skating forward, but you just slightly turn your skates, just a hair turn, not stopping, right? Because you don't want to actually stop forward momentum, and you've lost the play. So you just slightly turn your skates. It's really like, I wish I could show you, because and if you skated, you know what I mean.
Well, by all means. I mean, you can stand up and just mime it if you really want to go.
Yeah. So you're just but you turn slightly. It's a slight turn of your skates, and then all of a sudden you're coming back at the same, almost like a backward momentum, but you're going just as fast as you were going forward. And I was thinking about this last night, because for everyone in this period that we're in, we really have to pivot. We really have to learn how to keep our forward momentum, but changing direction, right? So any of the entrepreneurs that are out there, I'm sure they totally get this. You get this. You're an entrepreneur. You know that you have to pivot. Really, the minute you see something changes, you need to make that pivot. You need to turn the skates just slightly. You have to stop, turn slightly, and then just you change direction. So that's really, and pivot is really just the term for businesses when you're looking at a different. So you've got your business, but then all of a sudden something happens. COVID hits. You can't serve customers anymore. You can't actually get out and meet with people. You can't do the things that you were doing before. So you need to pivot. So how do you do that? You have to find another tool that's going to interact, not necessarily in the same way, but get the same message across. So what I did is I just learned from everyone that I would be able to get an hour from. I would say to them, "Do you have an hour to talk about something?" And they would say, "Sure." And what do you want to talk about? And I would give them the topic, um, because what I had to learn was a culture and a process, because I had been trained as a banker, but I knew how to do transactions. So it's one thing to know how to do a transaction. It's another thing to try to find out um, the way in which an asset trades, and then what's a good price, and then what's a better price, and then what's the price you sell. And I had to really read and study, and even graduate school really didn't do that. I mean, I got a cohort of people that I always relied on, and I learned all the basics, but I really had to take this time to really learn. So over the time I was at Hamilton, I just learned everything about the investment world. I tried to read everything I get my hands on. And then by about, kind of 13, 14 years into it, the equivalent of like feeling like your jersey's too small. I just said, I really need to take more risk. I need to get out there. And we decided that we would do that together. My wife, Sarah, whom you're very close with, we decided it was time for me to kind of venture out and try another jersey on. So I ended up in California. We all ended up in California working for one of our investment firms that we had invested with at MAP, which I had decided I would. I just became very close with the founder and my friend Jane Woodward, who started MAP, and I ended up coming and working for MAP by pivoting. Right, I was an investor, and so what I did is I kind of turned my skates and turned around, and I became a general partner or a private equity manager, and then applied everything I learned about investors to MAP so that we could then continue to build the firm, to get the psychology around what is this person thinking right now? You know, are you over explaining? I guess is the example. So that helped. And so um, really, really great decade in California. We lived in the Bay Area. It was wonderful. Um, we decided to come back here to be with my mom, who was, it was my turn and our turn to come back. And so we did. And our kids were in college, and it was time for me to try something else. And, among the things I did, I was at the root farm when you and I worked together, and that was great. It was a wonderful, again, another pivot. I hadn't worked in the nonprofit world. I hadn't worked in something that was so heart centered, but so challenging at the same time, to try to meet the needs of folks that really can't meet their own needs. And it was just a wonderful experience. And while I was at the root farm, I decided I was going to um, form a venture with a neighbor of mine, a friend, a really close friend of mine, my friend Tom Niehaus. We formed a renewable energy fund, which MAP was a renewable energy investment firm, and we decided we were going to do our own, but again, with a little different twist, to invest in hydroelectric facilities. So I was thinking about doing a full talk on electricity today, but I'm not sure your guests would really be interested.
Hey, you never know. I mean, let's like do a meta moment where we actually pivot in the conversation about pivoting.
Right? So we formed this fund, and it's been a great experience because when you do it on your own, as you know, you're the only person that really has to get the work done. You can't rely on anybody else. You don't have a team of people, and you get really good at being very crisp when you talk to people, and then also being aware of your time and what you're saying all the time, because you have to be really mindful of everybody else's time. But what we've been able to do is raise awareness about, it's not just investing in green energy. It's about thinking through problems in a different way. Hydroelectric power is something that has been in our world for over 150 years. It was used for all across the Mohawk Valley to make textiles. Like the power that were in these plants, where there was a turbine that spun, and the electricity was used to, whatever it was, to make textiles or to run other equipment. And they were kind of abandoned. So what we're doing is we're taking an old technology that has had some improvements, but we're going in and we're changing and modifying and updating and getting them into the cloud, and then investing in them, and then providing green power to the grid. So that's that's what we're doing. The things that we think we know about the way in which companies are formed and what happens, and a lot of it's just happy accident in many ways. Um, and so I have a few examples, but one of the ones that I was going to talk to you about was Airbnb, because if you wanted an example of a company that had to pivot, it's Airbnb. So we're in the Tom and I are in the energy business, so I know that it's a bit when we talk about energy, people really need to be mindful of what it is. So I was thinking I could give another example, but I thought I want to make it interesting for people. So everyone's used Airbnb. So let's go to that. So Airbnb was started, and I got thinking about this because of the news media has talked about what's going to come out of COVID. What are the great ideas? What are the new businesses that are going to be formed? And we don't know what they'll be. We don't know right now. But when we finally see this, when we come out of this, there will be some really amazing innovations in medicine that I don't think we can even think about right now. And I'm sure you've read about them, and I'm sure we'll all experience them, and hopefully will make us healthy. But at the end of the 2000s or the aughts, the iPhone started in June of 2007. So Apple rolled out the iPhone in June of 2007. And it seems like it couldn't have been 13 years ago, but it was. Yeah. So 2 months later, these two guys, Joe Gebbia and Brian Chesky, who were Rhode Island School of Design graduates, they were design artists, and they lived in San Francisco, and they had an apartment, and they couldn't pay the rent, and they wanted to figure out how they could get their rent paid, because at the time, and still is, San Francisco rents are high. I know you lived in Southern California, but
family in San Fran, so yeah.
And you have so know how expensive it is, and so you literally will not eat to pay your rent. So these two guys, and using this quote from RISD, which I found was really interesting, was that creativity can solve problems, is something that they pulled from. And so they went about trying to figure out how are they going to pay the rent. And there was a design convention that was coming up in San Francisco the following month. And there was going to be, let's just say there's 50 people or 100 people, whomever they knew that was going to be attending. They wanted to bring some money in and to be able to do it. So they started advertising online, saying, almost like, not Airbnb today, but kind of putting it up on a Google ad saying, rent my apartment on this weekend. Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay. So they're successful at doing that. So what they did is they bought 3 aero beds or air beds, and then they made breakfast for the people. Well, first of all, they bought the aero beds or whatever they were, which was, I don't know, $25 each or whatever it was. And then they went out to the grocery store, they got their stuff, and then they basically had their business at that point. They didn't know this right at that point, but they actually had their business. And this is the other thing, that if you're an entrepreneur, you don't know you actually have a business until you start solving a problem. And that was the other point that I wanted to make, which I mentioned to you yesterday. So this design conference occurs. They get 3 people from the design conference to stay with them. And then they kind of acted like tour guides all weekend. So then they would go around, and then they said, maybe. And so they got their rent paid for the month. They actually were able to pay the rent. So then they thought, well, how do we do this again? Right. And at the time, Google's ads were quite cheap. So you could actually go on Google, and for, I'm making it up, I don't know, 3-4 cents for every click or whatever it is, you could start to advertise. And so they did. And they were unsuccessful. So they weren't getting that many people to do it. But then what they realized is that they actually need to get customers to pay them more. So the customer funded model for startups is really critical. If you get people to pay, then you can take your cash and you can keep moving forward. Very much like what you're doing, right? You can invest in education, you can invest in training, you can go travel, you can, whatever you do. Mm-hmm. So coming up, they go through December. So they go through December 2007. They haven't made any money. They go through June of 2008, and it's the Democratic National Convention in Denver. And because they're design people, they thought, we've got to come up with a really cool thing that's going to get us beds in Denver so that we can do Airbnb in Denver, because they were really unsuccessful at that point. They weren't able to actually get people to come in. So what did they do? And you may know this story, because I didn't know the story
No.
until no. So I didn't know the story until I took this really terrific class from London Business School that was taught by an entrepreneur who's just a terrific. He explains things so well that it's really hard not to. So that's why I really liked him. um, so they go into the Democratic convention, and they decide to make cereal boxes. They decide to actually buy cereal boxes and then actually design the covers of cereal boxes by the candidates. So they had Obama O's, and they had what were they? For McCain, they were I can't remember, Captain McCain's, like Captain Crunch. So it was like Captain Crunch and O's.
Okay.
And they bought like 500 boxes each of these. And of course, the Obama O's sold more than the McCain's. But what they were able to do when they sold them was they were actually able, and before this, they had set up their hosts so that people could stay. And they said, look, this is what you get when you stay with us. You get an Obama O's or a Captain McCain's. And they were able to fill up their entire all of the listings that they had in Denver.
Wow.
And after that, they were off to the races. And that story, to me, and now Airbnb, everyone knows
Sure.
where it is, right?
Sure.
But what I could see in that period, there was a financial crisis. So let me tell you what was going on, right? You remember this. What was going on at that time was, I mean, the iPhone had just come out. How could you even get to people, really? I mean, through Blackberries? I mean, what were you doing? And so they were so creative, and because they were taught design, they knew how to get people's attention, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So the way, instead of just saying, let's wait until the number of iPhones gets up to 1 million, we're just going to start getting out there. And so they did really creative things. They did billboards, they did traditional advertising. They got friends to help them. And so it was a great story. And going into 2008, which was one of the financial crisis that was faced, their business started to go like this. And so with the market, the market going the opposite direction, they're going like this, the market's going like this, and the number of iPhones are going up, and Airbnb's off to the races. And the other thing that helped them was that the financial crisis just crushed the hotel business to the point where they could compete, and they were able to do that. What I learned about that was, no matter, anytime I think that we can't actually, when we're talking to investors, we're talking to them so much about why renewable energy is such a great thing. But what I've learned is that we just need to pivot ourselves so that we're in the right position to talk to the people that actually are already looking, right? So I thought about this too, to tie this together, because you need to be in your target market, and then you need to sell, and you have to close them right when they're doing it. So, Gebby and Chesky went to Denver. They knew it was a captive audience. They had, I don't know how many, 30,000 people that they were working on, and they were able to get their business going. And that's really what I've learned about this entire concept. And it refined it a little bit by taking this class. So entrepreneurs in general, as you go through it, you're going to see this path it's really not a straight line. And in the times you think you have to, you're going to quit, are actually the times you probably should step on the gas, right? So, and like the founders of Airbnb almost ran out of money. I mean, they had credit card debt that was like 30 grand each, and then all of a sudden, within 4 or 5 years, they're billionaires. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen overnight, but it does tell the story that you probably, you shouldn't quit. Although many times in my career, I felt like, this is so hard. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Can I pause you for a second, Pete, just to ask you a question about that? Thank you so much. You just, I feel like you connected it beautifully all the way back from the hockey analogy. I think you were off and running from there. So thank you for connecting the dots. So that is something I get very passionate about, and I love hearing people's perspectives regarding how to know when to, like you say, don't quit, but at some point, sometimes it is necessary to be honest and like not be burning fumes and to say, okay, I gave it my all. But how do you know the difference? So many times I
Hmm.
hear, you know, as soon as it gets like super hard, like you thought you had 3 hurdles and all of a sudden you have like 40 hurdles in front of you, all of a sudden the road was clear. So can you
Right.
speak to that, like to any insight you have from experience or just
Um,
understanding?
yeah, I think for personal, so I'll give you two examples, right? I'll give you a personal experience, and then I'll give you another startup example
Sure.
because it's helpful. So in personal experience, um, when I left Hamilton, I what I did is I decided I wanted to stay in the endowment world, but I wanted to go to a different institution, wear a different jersey, and I did. And I was recruited. I went to Emory University, and I went to a place that was probably great for everybody else except for the most important person, which is me.
Okay.
Okay, so I go there and I think this has got to work out. And this is an example of knowing when to quit, right? When you know when to quit, I think it's more when it's not only physically affecting you, but you no longer are yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when something pushes you to the point, any business, anything, where, and it doesn't mean whether it's successful or it's not successful. And I'll get into the financial part because I can give you the financial methods as well, but this is more about who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because you can lose a lot of money and still be yourself, right? You can do your own business. You may actually, you may have to pivot a little bit. But I went to Emory. I was there for a short time. I knew I didn't want to be there. It wasn't the place for me, wrong fit. Um, and I realized I got to parachute out of this. I really need to. So I sat down and I just said, look, this isn't working for me. It's not working for you. I know it's not working for you. That was so hard for me to do I don't know how old was I? I was kind of early 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're just kind of, you think you're self actualized, but I had to push myself to the point, like I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to go to the side and pivot over to be the person that was making the decisions. I decided at that point I wanted to go, and then I ended up at an investment firm because that's what I needed to do. I needed to I finally realized I have to make these decisions. I have to go. So I had to go in a different direction. But I did it not because of money. I didn't because of anything else. Because in my heart, it wasn't the place for me. So on a financial side of it, you can't put yourself with a startup, right? You can't put your family and everything you have, friends, family, credit cards, everything you've got. There's a certain in California they have break points. Fire. They're called fire breaks,
Okay.
and every business needs a fire break. I learned this in graduate school. So you need a fire break, and it could be somebody that's a mentor, it could be somebody that's a board member. It's going to be somebody that's actually going to help you from really hurting yourself. So you have to almost kind of hand that over to them and say, "Where's my fire break?" And the fire break is really a financial measure. So you're essentially saying, okay, if I'm 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is that you put in capital, you're putting yourself into debt, and then you have to have someone else, an independent person who cares about you, but also can give you the straight advice.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. So that you need that fire break for certain decisions. It's very easy. Your customers go away, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
yeah. So customer driven models are the way to answer this because you just need to continue to build that base. So um, you won't ever fail, right? If the customer's paying for this in advance, you have time. So say a customer pays 30 days in advance, 60 days in advance,
Yeah.
right? So you get it in, and you have that cash. What are you going to do with it? Well, you're either going to maybe like the Airbnb guys, go out and buy more ads, because the model for them was they received in advance, and then when the customer showed up, they paid the renter. They got their fee beforehand. So what did they do? They went out to Google and
Mm-hmm.
they bought more ads. They
Mm-hmm.
bought more customers. So long answer, but
No,
but
it's
it's
not, but
yeah.
it's making sense. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then so I would say knowing when to quit, from an example of that, um, I would say probably that, the best examples of that are mergers. Like, when you're merging with another company,
Mhm.
you're not, you can't really think of it as quitting, right? You're just being acquired to become something else. And
Mhm.
so that's something in the business world that's actually, it's a much maligned area. Any company that gets taken over, there's layoffs.
Sure.
There's always something or somebody doing it better, or so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
Mhm.
um, but I would say it's a combination, personal and financial, that you have to kind of, and it's all related to what your story is and where you came from and what you're doing. And then also knowing how long you've got to do this. How long do you want to do it? Some people are just like, I just want to, I want to do this for 5 years. And I kind of always laugh when people ask me, like, what do you think about them? What do you think about that model? And I said, well, I don't think you know.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think you know that you're going to do this for 5 years. You could do it for two and say, I don't know, I want to go do improv comedy, or I want to
Mhm.
be a singer, or I want to go learn guitar. Right.
Mhm.
So
And just
that
reassess
making sense?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
you're gonna give, if it makes you feel more comfortable to give yourself like a concrete deadline, at least do it shorter in time versus like it always reminds me of the interview question that everybody dreads, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it's like, I don't know anybody who really
you,
knows.
you know what I you know what I say to that question?
Yeah, I would, no, I don't. I would love to know.
I say I'm not going to be here.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Cool. No, I
Yeah.
love that. Tell
And
me
I
more
mean
about that.
here. So I mean here, meaning where I am right now.
Yeah, I
It's
love that.
Yeah, because it's a neutral way to answer it.
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to be in a different place. This is where, and these are my ideas now, but I know they're going to change. Now,
Yes.
I wouldn't have answered that question when I was 30. I probably would have said, you know, well, I see myself as the
Yeah.
CEO or whatever. I mean, not even CEO. I didn't even think I could ever become one. So, or CFO, whatever it is. I didn't even know what I wanted to be. Will Ferrell talks about when he was a kid, that he didn't know what he wanted to be, but he had this image of himself with like a hat and a suitcase, and he was like coming home from the office, and he didn't even he just was.
But yeah, I love that answer, that I won't be here. And it's and especially the way that you say it can be said, and so
Mhm.
not like a, screw you defensive way, but just in like a very practical and
Yeah,
also optimistic way. So
yeah. I mean,
any current job seekers who are out there who are recent college grads or not, there's your answer. You just got an interview answer out of the deal. Thank you, Pete Blanchfield. You said when you were in your early 40s,
hmm,
when you were referencing back, that you thought you were so self-actualized, and you're like, no, actually I had more to learn, is what I gathered from that.
yeah.
Just be honest with yourself.
Hmm.
What else? What are like one or two other pieces of advice that you would have given to yourself, that you, like, if you looked back, you, whether to calm yourself or to keep you going or to.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think when I think about myself, I'll just give you an example of maybe when I was in such a hurry um, to be better at everything I was doing. Like I felt like I needed to do it then, and very competitive person. Um, I mean, you know me in a business sense and a friend sense, but I'm, hopelessly competitive about a lot of things, not with other people personally, but with myself. Um, I think part of what it is, it goes back to Gretzky said, what is it? You miss 100% you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yes.
Okay. So I used to spend all my time on perfecting the shot, like, well, if I do it this way and I do it exactly. And what I didn't realize was that I should just take more shots, like do more things. Like if I was 20, if I could tell my 25-year-old self, I would have said, you know, um, take a couple risks once in a while. Do something that where you actually, the outcome isn't as great as as you might want it to be.
Hmm.
I mean, I've learned more from my failures than I have and I remember, it's so funny because you go back and you realize, God, I made a mistake on that. But man, I learned so much about myself and, how to handle it, because we're all about kind of figuring ourselves out. That takes a while. But I would, I told my 25-year-old self, just take a couple risks, do something that, you know, take $500 and invest in something, or do something where it's out of your comfort zone, you know,
Yeah.
and
It's
I
huge.
didn't get the courage to do that until, I'm 53. So it took me, it took me a long time. It took me 25 years to figure out I could do that, I guess. But it was worth it. It's worth
Yeah.
it. But yeah, I would say, and also look for people that know more than you about something. Because I think the general tendency is you want to become an expert at things. And the whole concept of a library, right, is that so you can read about someone else that's done it, that you never knew about. And that's what I've always tried to do. I just have cultivated experts all along my career, just people that I can call and say, "How do you do this?" And they usually say, "Well, I don't know." Um, this is
That
what
makes it
I,
so much
yeah,
like that answer I don't want to speak for you, but when I hear someone who I look up to say, I don't know, it's like a slew of, I love you even more. I have more respect for you. I have more, you have so much more integrity. You're everything that I loved you about is now magnified by a million.
mhm.
And then on top of
Yeah,
all that, you realize they're human. You're like, oh, you're actually a human too. And you don't know the answer.
yeah, yeah. I know, right? Yeah, I know. I know. It's like it's so easy, right? You just basically ask somebody that knows more than you do. It's a very simple thing to do. Um, but yeah, so we're pivoting. I think we're all pivoting right now. I think we're all trying to come up with our ways to. There's a lot of defensiveness. I talk to a lot of my friends who are, um, I've cultivated a group of friends that are younger, my age, and older. So I
Mhm.
have people to turn to that, mainly the Hamilton students that work for me, and they're now having kids, and so they're nervous about everything. The world's ending, and nothing's gonna, I don't know, we're not going outside, all those things,
Yeah.
and I can't take my kid out in Brooklyn to walk down the block because, whatever. And it's a real fear. But I was just talking to one of my friends, and he was, he just, I just don't see us getting out of this. I was like, oh, really? We're not going to get. I was like, wait a second. You were the one that was like stayed
Oh,
up all night. You stayed up all night till 4 in the morning, and you had an economic exam at 8 o'clock. So I mean, talk about getting through it. I think you can get. I think we're going to be fine. I think we're going to get out of this. I mean, it's a scary time. It's a scary time for any business because um, everything that we learned, like from business school to being in any position where you're making decisions, every risk has happened. Every risk that you could possibly happen, that could have possibly happened, has happened.
mhm.
And I just think it does take a lot to really think forward. I have to do this every day to think, okay, what's the long game? What are we doing? What's going to happen in a year? Um, where are we going to be in a year? What's going to happen in a year? And build to that, right? Like for your business, there's a huge opportunity, right? There's a huge opportunity to get out there to show people that the way in which we communicate probably will determine our success more than our actual accomplishments, right?
Mhm.
How we relate to each other, how we can um, get together on a Sunday and talk about ice skating and pivoting and Airbnb. Let's think, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to be. I don't know why I'm so optimistic, but I just am. I think just what it's self-awareness, really. I mean, it's self-awareness that and then not trying to overreach, not trying to try to help a person when you can't help them.
Mhm.
That's essentially, and you don't even know how they're feeling. You don't really know, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how many books you read or what you do. When you feel the resistance of something, right? When you feel that, when you see that whatever you do and you push as hard as you can, it's coming right back on you.
Mhm.
Until you feel that in your life, when it's really something that's pushing you back, and it's something else other than who you are as a person.
Mhm.
um, it's whatever it is. It's your disability, it's the color of your skin, it's your gender, and whatever it is. And when you feel that resistance, when it's there, and the people that have felt it, they know, they know. And if you haven't, you really shouldn't try to feel like the empathy part is important. Everyone, as human beings, we all have empathy for each other because we're all looking at each other and we're all very much the same, even though we have different characteristics, right? And knowing when you can put your hand up and say, look, I don't know, but you can tell me, well, I'm going to listen. You tell me what it feels like to have that resistance of somebody pushing you down when you're trying as hard as you possibly can, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I try to also in business, I try to stay as apolitical as I possibly can, to not really, but you have to take sides at a certain point.
Yeah.
You have to stand up for the people that you work with, the people you care about, the people that that are going to work with you and not, necessarily not against you. And so that's why, yeah. But it is, I guess, isn't it empathy though? I mean, I guess I got to ask you that. I don't know whether
It is.
it
So
is or not.
yeah, I absolutely was not saying that we need less of it. And, you saying
And I
everybody,
agree with you though. I agree with you.
I don't think everybody has this. I think it's an innate quality within us.
Right.
I feel that from past whatever, who we all have our own life experience.
Right.
There are all these like guards around being empathetic, like tons, like just so many of being taken advantage of or being scared of being vulnerable, or like when you're empathetic, you are so vulnerable because you're fully listening to someone. So the point was like, self-compassion is the bedrock to empathy, because when you're kinder to yourself, you become more tender, and so you just become more willing to listen. And there's like you're tender, but you're also stronger. So it's like this beautiful, you just think of like a meaty heart, like your heart becomes not hardened, but it's stronger. So it's like pumping like stronger blood. Like that's what helps me visually whenever I think about that. And it's when you're kinder to yourself, you're going to show up more open to other people. You're going to stand in the discomfort. You're not going to assume that just because I'm a woman, this person's treating me this way. I could immediately go there. That's what I was going to say. Like my reaction could be like, if I was a guy with this person, and then I can pause myself, which is the self-awareness, and go, you know what? Sure, that possibly could be. If you have the opportunity, ask questions. You don't always have the opportunity, but if you do, and it's not to say that you're not fighting for something or like rooting for something to change in the workplace about, gender differences and all, like that's not what I'm saying, but I think that we have a tendency to assume so quickly.
Oh yeah.
And just to be like, see, I told you, see, that's why we got to do this, because it just happened. I just walked out of the bathroom. Like it just gets
right. It's proving your own hypothesis, right?
Yes, totally.
It's not the null hypothesis. It's a directional hypothesis. Like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's the confirmation bias, isn't that?
Confirmation bias. Exactly. I was working on that.
So if there's one thing that people can take away that you'd be psyched if people took away from our conversation, what would it be?
I would say, when you're in a position to make a decision, always kind of question yourself and go through this almost like if you're doing the right thing, there's a way to do it, right? So you think about how it affects me, how it affects the other person, and then how does it affect the team around me? So if it's two people, like, it's you and me, right? So it affects me, it affects Christy, but then how does it affect everybody in the audience right now? So I've done that as a way to be more self-aware of what I'm doing. And then you have to actually ask the group, like this audience, you have to ask them what they think, because you can't just make the decision without actually really asking them. There's some things, in business where you just have to execute, and execution is different than decision making. Good decision making means everyone understands your point, but you can't understand the person's point unless if I don't explain it to you what I'm doing, it's that kind of over explaining and not understanding. So I think everybody, if I were to tell everybody, just, you can say less, you can say a lot more by just asking questions and then listening. Like, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? Right? And then just listen, hear what comes back, and then follow up later. If you really have a strong reaction to what, like, I don't think, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, Okay, Christy, great. Like for me in the investment
Oh
world,
my
you'd
God,
be
you
like,
gave me like a smug smile with that. Like you really got into character. Bravo.
I did.
Blanchfield.
Okay. I can be my investment guy right now. Okay, Christy, you don't short Amazon right now. Okay. No, just like you come up with an idea and I just completely reject it. It's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Just pause, just wait, write it down, put a little star next to it and go
Mhm.
to the next person. Collect all the, and it doesn't take that long. How many
Right.
people are, so it's you, me, and your group, right? And I just have to make sure that I ask a quick question. What do you think of that session? And you just looking for the feedback, but also making sure that when you're making these decisions, you really do include others
Mm.
and you really ask the question, how does this affect you? I can tell you how it affects me. It's kind of the way it goes. And businesses really will sink or swim because of that. If you just take your marketing team and you just go in one direction without including the accountants and the finance team, you're just not going to win. You're just not going to be able to do that. So it's just this question and answer, which you can find this. There's also lots of resources around this
Sure.
about the I think Jack Welch probably did it best with GE with 360, right? So that I would give you a specific example. 360 is really the same thing. 360 meaning you evaluate me, I evaluate you, and then one of our peers evaluates us.
Mhm.
Now, I think it's fraught with um, gender bias. I think it's fraught with um, people in positions of authority are going to patronize you, to say, you're doing great, and you're not, right? Or you're this person's here, she's here, and you're here, and she's like, just keep working, just keep working. No, what I want you to tell me is how can I get up here? Like that's where I want to be. So just give me the straight facts about what do I have to learn, what do I have to study, those
Mhm.
kinds of things. So 360 is an example of this.
Yeah, I love
But I
it.
would just say, if to walk away from this, I would say in any of the in your business or whatever you do, to just ask those questions and listen, like you were saying. I think that would be a good way to go.
I love it. Pete, thank you so much. You just like nailed self-awareness and empathy in those three, like check myself, check you, and check the broader people involved.
Great. Now I have to actually go out and do that now again.
Well, do you literally, or now you're saying you have to hold yourself accountable?
No, I hold myself accountable. No
Yeah.
one. I don't ever feel like I just. Um, and that's really the lesson for me is that each situation is different. Every single quote transaction is different, right? You have to hold yourself. We all
Yeah.
should always ask that, do I know this or don't I know, and go find somebody that does.
Oh, I love it. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Pete.
Thanks for including me in your
Is
closet.
there any place that, like, if people want to find you at all, where you want people? I
Go
just
on
want.
LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn. I'm there, and I'd love to hook up with all of you. I can, you could have a way to link me in, and I can just, and there's people that I've got a lot of people that along the way that, if you need advice on whatever you're working on, especially on the business side, I've been able to kind of tap a lot of folks that you never would imagine that they would help you. So if you do have entrepreneurs that are out there that want to talk to me, and then yeah, just send me a note.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Pete, and we'll talk soon.
You're awesome. Thank you.